This video is only possible thanks to viewers like you. To support the channel and get more, go to patreon.com/optimisticduelist and subscribe. Link in the description. Hey guys, so a lot of people have been asking me to do a video covering the paradox clones and ectobiology in general, and I realized that no video on Homestuck Explained really covered that to its full effect. So for the official last episode of Homestuck Explained Season 1, we're going to do just that. The effects of ectobiology on the story of Homestuck are far-reaching, to say the least, and it's not hard to see why so many fans get so confused by it. But, like anything else in Homestuck, it's defined by a pretty simple rule set, so once you understand what the mechanics of ectobiology are, hopefully the results will be a lot easier to follow. So without further ado, let's get into it. What is ectobiology? The answer is that it's Homestuck's futuristic science combining the practices of cloning, breeding, and genetic modification. The practice of ectobiology is carried out through specific ectobiology terminals located throughout the world of Homestuck. Ectobiology can work on multiple different species, but it works on all of them in roughly the same way. The process begins with the Aperifier, which functions to summon basically any object in paradox space at any point in time and in any location to the Aperifier pad. While this makes a purification very powerful, it's also quite complicated, since it requires the target's specific coordinates in their given universe, as well as its position in that universe's timeline. On top of that, if purifying an entity would cause a paradox because its presence is important to future or pseudo-future events, then the process fails and the Aperifier instead produces a paradox ghost slime imprint of the entity. This gives a purification technology a reputation for being notoriously unreliable, but for the purposes of ectobiology, this ghost slime is actually the intended result. This is because it contains the object's genetic data, which can then be manipulated to produce a variety of paradox clones, both viable and non-viable, which can fall into one of three categories. Babies that are a perfect copy of the original target's genetic data are known as perfect paradox clones, and are in fact always destined to go back in time and become the thing that was cloned in the first place. This is how John fathered the Alpha Kids. His ectobiology terminal produced genetic slime, copied from his own Nana, Jade's grandfather, Dave's older brother, and Rose's mom, meaning Jane, Jake, Dirk, and Roxy are related only to themselves and their respective children, since the machine next combines the genetic material of Grandpa and Nana to produce John Egbert and Jade Harley, and of Mom and Bro to produce Dave Strider and Rose Lalonde, meaning that Dirk and Roxy are the biological parents of Rose and Dave. Jane and Jake are the biological parents of John and Jade, and each pair of children are twin siblings. This is the second type of clone production, breeding, the practice of producing clones by combining two or more genetic samples. The first Guardians meant to protect the planet from destruction and facilitate the events that give rise to the Spurb session are also created through breeding, which highlights just how sophisticated and flexible ectobiological breeding can be. Provided you have a well-thought-out DNA code, you don't even need a sample. And in the case of the Beta Troll's first Guardian, Doc Scratch, we discover that ectobiology can seemingly draw genetic information out of non-living things, like a cue ball that can magically answer any question correctly, and Bro's creepy ventriloquist dummy, Lil Cal. These items don't just influence Doc Scratch's appearance by making him a bulb-headed puppet thing, they also imbue him with their nature, the cue ball being one of many elements that make Doc Scratch omniscient, and Lil Cal turning Doc Scratch into essentially a duplicate copy of Lord English's very soul, which to me suggests that ectobiology doesn't actually work on the biological level, but instead, like alchemy, works to reconstitute entities from their most basic subatomic components, the aspects. We'll come back to breeding's thematic implications in a minute, but let's deviate real quick and talk about mutant clones, the third kind of clone created by ectobiology. Simply put, a mutant is what it sounds like. A copy of a single target an ectobiology terminal latches onto, mutated in some way, and so not destined to go back in time to become themselves, because they're a fundamentally different entity. The only characters we've seen deliberately use mutation are Jade Harley and Kanaya Mariam, whose quests as space players involved both breeding and selectively mutating a variety of frogs in order to produce the genetic code of the Genesis frog, which would become the new universe of the victorious players. That covers the rules of ectobiology, so now let's talk about what the story uses it to say. Through ectobiology, Homestuck provides a playful sci-fi answer to the complicated family dynamics we see in various creation myths and pantheons over the course of human history. But Homestuck's cast both takes this to the next level and cuts out the creepy implications. The most extreme case is probably the relationship between John and his Nana, since while he's biologically Jane's son, depending on how you look at it, he could also be considered her grandson, grandfather, and dad simultaneously. Learning the biological truth of their relationships doesn't actually change much for any of these characters. Family has less to do with biology, Homestuck argues, and more to do with the experience of growing up in the shadow of another person, and using their stories and experiences in order to construct the context of your own identity. Greco-Roman mythology usually thinks about parentage almost exclusively in the context of who sired who, or who mothered who. By calling these mythological priorities into question, Homestuck lays the groundwork to later completely subvert the assumptions of those mythologies. Namely, that the most important part of a marriage or relationship is the parent's ability to reproduce. Romantic relationships in Homestuck have nothing to do with reproduction whatsoever. Basically, every character ends up in relationships that are historically not considered reproductively viable. But that doesn't really matter, because ectobiology lets characters make new combinations of their genetic material without any of the fuss and drama of human relationships. The characters do exactly that at the end of the story when they mix and match their genetic material to produce new offspring for Earth-C. And so, Homestuck is able to present a society where LGBT individuals are perfectly capable of producing genetic viable offspring and carrying on a perfectly functioning society. Which is both subversive and relevant when you think about it. A future where people can casually copy and paste their genetic profiles together is on the horizon, and when it comes, it'll come with the question, why are romantic relationships important to us, really? This is why I refer to Homestuck as an explicitly LGBT creation myth, because it actually makes an effort to tackle and answer these very broad, very existential questions, even when it explores heterosexual attraction and relationships. In the near future, I'd like to make a series of videos exploring those themes from a more macrocosmic view of Homestuck's story, outside of the Homestuck Explained series, exploring the main romantic arcs in Homestuck and what each of them has to add to these existential ideas. Let me know if you'd be particularly interested in that, and maybe I'll get around to it faster depending on what I hear back. Thanks for watching, as always. Huge thanks go out to my patrons for making this video possible. If you want to help support the channel and come join us at our awesome and growing Discord community, feel free to join us for as little as $1 a month. You can also find me on the r/Hiveswap Reddit and Discord. That's all for now, so thank you again, and as always, keep rising.